You found the exit. Most people never will. There is a moment that changes almost every extraordinary life, not when they become successful, not when they become wealthy. Long before any of that, it happens quietly, so quietly that almost everyone walks past it without ever realizing it existed. Imagine spending your entire life inside a maze you never knew was a maze. Every path feels normal, because everyone around you is walking the same direction. You go to school, find a job, chase weekends, pay bills, repeat. It doesn't feel like a trap because it's the only reality you've ever known. Then one day, something strange happens. For just a second, you notice a crack in the wall. Not a giant doorway, not a flashing exit sign, just enough evidence to make you question everything you thought was permanent. Most people look away. They tell themselves they're overthinking. They keep walking, but a few people stop. And those people never see the world the same way again, because the exit was never hidden. It was hidden inside the questions everyone else was too afraid to ask. Here's the first illusion the maze teaches you. It tells you that every decision you've made was your own. But was it? Think back to your childhood. Before you knew what success looked like, someone else defined it for you. Get good grades, find a stable job, earn more money, buy a bigger house, retire someday. Nobody asked whether that path was right for you. It was simply handed to you, one expectation at a time, until it stopped feeling like someone else's script and started feeling like your own. That's how the maze survives, not through force, through familiarity. Psychologists call it social proof, the tendency to believe something is correct simply because everyone else believes it. If enough people walk in one direction, your brain assumes they must know something you don't. So you keep walking, even when you're exhausted, even when something inside you whispers that this can't be the whole story, because turning around feels more frightening than staying lost. Look around for a moment. How many people wake up already counting the hours until the weekend? How many spend years chasing promotions they don't even enjoy? How many postpone their dreams with one sentence? I'll start when the timing is better. Then another year disappears. Then another. The maze doesn't steal your life all at once. It borrows a day. Then another. Then another. Until one morning you realize you've traded decades for a future that never actually arrived. The cruelest part? Most people don't recognize the trap because it doesn't feel like one. It feels safe, predictable, comfortable. And comfort has a strange way of disguising captivity. The moment you begin questioning what's considered normal, the walls stop looking solid. You begin to notice doors where everyone else still sees concrete, and that's exactly where the real search begins. If the exit is real, why doesn't everyone find it? Because the greatest prison ever created doesn't lock your body. It trains your attention. Every single day, thousands of things compete for one limited resource: your focus, notifications, headlines, deadlines, entertainment, endless scrolling. By the time the day ends, your mind feels busy, but somehow unchanged. That's not an accident. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. It prefers the familiar over the uncertain because familiar feels safe. Neuroscientists call this the status quo bias, our tendency to stick with what we already know, even when something better is waiting just beyond our comfort zone. The maze depends on that instinct. It doesn't need to convince you that you're trapped. It only needs to keep you too distracted to notice the walls. Think about the last time you had a quiet moment with your own thoughts. No phone, no music, no television, no conversation, just you. For many people, those moments have become almost unbearable. Silence forces questions to surface. Questions like, is this really the life I wanted? When did I stop chasing what mattered? Who would I become if I weren't afraid of disappointing everyone else? Those questions are dangerous, not because they hurt you, because they wake you up. The people who eventually find the exit aren't necessarily smarter. They aren't luckier. They simply become willing to sit with uncomfortable questions long enough to hear honest answers. Most people escape discomfort by reaching for another distraction. The few who refuse begin to see patterns invisible to everyone else. They realize the walls were never built from concrete. They were built from assumptions, repeated so many times that they started to sound like facts. And once an assumption is questioned, it loses the power to keep you where you are. That's the moment the maze begins to crack. Here's the lie that keeps the maze alive. It tells you that staying where you are is the safest option. It isn't. It's simply the most familiar. Every decision carries a price. The difficult choices demand payment today. The easy choices send you the bill years later. That's why comfort feels so expensive in hindsight. Not because it hurts in the moment, because it almost never does. Imagine two versions of your life. One version takes a risk, learns a new skill, starts the business, ends the unhealthy relationship, speaks the truth, faces rejection. The other version waits. Just one more month, one more year, one more perfect opportunity. At first, the second life feels easier. There's no uncertainty, no embarrassment, no chance of failure, but something invisible begins to accumulate. Regret. Unlike failure, regret compounds quietly. Behavioral psychologists describe this as loss aversion. We fear losing what we already have far more than we value what we might gain. So we protect our comfort, even when that comfort is slowly costing us the life we actually want. The maze understands this better than you do. It doesn't need to promise happiness. It only needs to convince you that change is too risky. And every year, you believe that story. The walls grow a little taller. One day you'll look back and realize the opportunities didn't disappear overnight. They disappeared one postponed decision at a time. The exit was never locked. It simply required a step that felt uncomfortable. That's what separates the few from the many. The few eventually become more afraid of staying the same than they are of changing. And the moment that balance shifts, fear stops acting like a prison. It becomes a compass, pointing toward the very door you've been avoiding. Because sometimes the strongest sign you're facing the right direction is that it scares you enough to hesitate. Every maze has one invisible rule. Don't question the people already inside it. The moment you begin thinking differently, something strange happens. People notice. Not because you've changed overnight, but because your questions make them uncomfortable. You'll hear things like, "Be realistic. That's not how the world works. You're overthinking it. Just be grateful for what you have." It sounds like advice. Sometimes it's even given with love. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't always defend reality, they defend familiarity. If they've spent 20 years believing one path is the only safe path, your decision to explore another one forces them to confront a possibility they've spent years avoiding. And that's painful. So instead of questioning their beliefs, they question yours. This is why so many people turn back just before they reach the exit. Not because they lose confidence in themselves, because they borrow someone else's fear. For centuries, psychologists have observed a simple pattern. We naturally seek approval from the group because for most of human history, belonging meant survival. Being rejected by the tribe once carried real danger. Your brain still carries that ancient wiring. That's why criticism can feel physically uncomfortable. Why standing alone feels heavier than standing still. But here's what changes everything. The people who eventually build extraordinary lives don't stop feeling fear. They simply stop asking fear for permission. They realize that every meaningful decision will disappoint someone. Every new path will confuse people who never intended to leave the old one. And that's okay, because the purpose of your life was never to become understandable to everyone else. It was to become honest with yourself. The exit isn't the moment the world starts believing in you. It's the moment you no longer need it to. And when that happens, the opinions that once felt like chains become nothing more than echoes behind you. Because the final lock on every invisible prison is the belief that someone else should decide how your life ought to be lived. Every exit demands proof, no certificate, no applause, no guarantee. Just one decision repeated until it becomes your new reality. The first step rarely changes your circumstances. It changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone waiting. You become someone building. That shift sounds small, but it quietly transforms everything. Your habits begin matching your beliefs. Your calendar, conversations, and priorities slowly reorganize themselves. You read differently. You spend differently. You choose friends differently. Even your excuses start sounding unfamiliar. This is where most people become impatient. They expect dramatic results after dramatic decisions. Real transformation, however, is almost invisible at first. Like roots growing beneath the soil, the deepest progress happens before anyone can measure it. Days pass. Nothing remarkable seems different. Then weeks, then months. One morning, someone says, "You've changed." What they really mean is this: your actions have finally become visible enough for others to notice. But the truth is that the change started long before anyone could see it. It started the day you stopped negotiating with the person you wanted to become. The exit was never a destination waiting somewhere outside you. It was a daily practice of choosing alignment over convenience. One honest decision, then another, then another. Eventually, your life stops looking like an escape story. It starts looking like home. And that's when you understand the greatest secret of all. You were never escaping the maze. You were becoming the person who could no longer live inside it. From that moment forward, every choice becomes quieter, clearer, and strangely lighter. You still face uncertainty, setbacks, and doubt, but none of them decide your direction anymore. You do. That is freedom. Not certainty, but ownership of every next step you willingly take, regardless of the fear still walking beside you daily. Most people imagine freedom as a finish line, a certain income, a dream house, a perfect career, a life without problems. But that's another illusion the maze quietly sells. Because every person who reaches one mountain eventually discovers another waiting beyond it. The destination keeps moving. That's why so many successful people still feel trapped. They escaped one maze, only to build another around themselves. The real exit was never about changing your address. It was about changing your awareness. The moment you realize your choices belong to you, something extraordinary happens. External success stops becoming your definition. It becomes a byproduct. You no longer chase achievements to prove your worth. You pursue them because they align with the person you've chosen to become. That difference changes everything. Failure loses its power to define you. Success loses its power to control you. Neither one determines your identity anymore. You do. Think about the people history remembers. Their greatest contribution wasn't money, or fame, or influence. It was courage. The courage to reject a script they never agreed to follow. Every invention, every movement, every breakthrough began with someone refusing to accept that this is just how things are. That same opportunity exists today. Not someday, not when conditions become perfect. Today. The question is whether you'll recognize it when it appears disguised as an uncomfortable decision, because that's how exits usually arrive. Quietly, without applause, without certainty. Just a single choice, asking whether you'll trust your future more than your fear. Most people will hesitate until the moment passes. Then, they'll call it bad luck. But you'll know better. You'll understand that freedom was never something waiting to be discovered. It was something waiting to be chosen. And once that choice becomes part of who you are, no maze will ever feel permanent again. By now, you might be wondering where the exit actually is. Is it a new career? A business? A different city? More money? A bold decision you've been avoiding? Maybe. Maybe not. Because the exit is rarely a place. It's a moment. A moment when you stop allowing yesterday's fears to make today's decisions. Everything you've heard until now points to one uncomfortable truth. The walls around you are not built from concrete. They're built from assumptions you've repeated for so long that they started sounding like facts. I'm too late. I'm not talented enough. People like me don't succeed. Maybe next year. Those sentences feel harmless. But repeated often enough, they become the blueprint of an entire life. Here's the remarkable part. None of those beliefs can survive honest action. The first conversation, the first application, the first investment, the first chapter, the first attempt. Action has a way of exposing fear for what it truly is. Not a prophecy, just a possibility, your mind confused with certainty. One step won't solve everything. It won't erase doubt. It won't guarantee success. But it will accomplish something far more important. It will prove that the door you've been waiting for was never locked, only unopened. Years from now, you'll remember this chapter of your life, not because it was the easiest, but because it was the day you stopped asking whether the exit existed and started walking toward it. Because in the end, the greatest divide between extraordinary lives and ordinary ones isn't intelligence, luck, or talent. It's that one group keeps waiting for permission. The other quietly begins. And once you've taken that first step, you'll realize the exit wasn't something you found. It was someone you finally became. So here you are, at the same place where every extraordinary journey quietly begins. Not with certainty, not with confidence, with a choice. Tomorrow morning, the world will look exactly as it did today. The same streets, the same responsibilities, the same distractions competing for your attention. Nothing around you will announce that this is your chance. That's why most people miss it. They wait for a dramatic sign, a perfect opportunity, the right time. But the exit has never looked dramatic. It has always looked like one small decision repeated consistently. Now ask yourself one final question. A year from today, when you look back on this moment, will you remember it as another video you watched, or the day you finally started walking in a different direction? Because the truth is, you already know where your exit is. You knew it long before this video ended. The only thing left is whether you'll have the courage to take the first step. If this video changed the way you see your own life, share it with someone who's still searching for their way out. And if you want more stories that challenge the way you think, make sure you subscribe. The exit has always existed. The question was never whether you could find it. It was whether you'd choose to walk through it.